started off as a small town on the eastern bank of the river. It has always been a place for textile production, and so the bed was used for dyeing cloth bed. It's not a perennial river. It's a monsoon-fed river, and in the summer months, the bed of the river was also used for farming. Of course, the river was an important place for the poor people of Ahmedabad, who could not find a place in the city to live. This was the place where they could build their hutments. This is already in 1976. You will see that the river banks are a place where the poor built their stormwater drains that brought along with the stormwater, actually a lot of untreated sewage used to flow down the bridge. And only places where people could enjoy the river from were the bridges. And in summer, a lot of people would promenade up and down the bridges, because that's the only place from which you could enjoy the expanse of the river. By the end of the 20th century, the city had turned its back completely to the river. Here's a view of the riverfront, the way it was. You have lots of activity, you have slums, you have washing, dyeing, you have a lot of sewage in the river. A bit of a mess here because of all of that, and this is an artist's impression of the state. Most Indian cities have been abusing their rivers. Here's a view from Pune. The center of Pune, even if you go today, this is the river in the center of Pune. It's a garbage dump and it's sewage. Most Indian rivers are encroached upon by houses that poor people build and slums. They also, most Indian rivers are polluted. That's where industrial effluent is often put directly into rivers. What's important to remember is that Indian cities are not unique in abusing their rivers. Here's a great picture from China, in Yangtze. And of course, today's industrializing cities are not unique in abusing their rivers. All the European rivers were in much worse state than our river. Here's an image of London or in England. Today, in contrast to these abused riverfronts, many cities have wonderful waterfronts. Those of you who come from Europe, of course, know this. That's Paris. This is the river in the middle of the city. It has a small river, but a beautiful riverfront where you can find quiet spots like this to sit and enjoy. In the middle of a dense metropolis, you can find quiet spots like this. Here's London. It also has a terrific waterfront, and everybody knows this famous amusement there, the London Eye. Look at New York. It's a huge metropolis with lots of people there. But it has gardens like this along the way. Here's another one view. You walk all along this and you get lovely spots like this in the middle of the city where you can walk and quietly enjoy the sunset across the river. So that's a view from New York. That's Sydney waterfront. Everybody knows this as a famous waterfront. And that's Singapore. This is also famous, and so is Shanghai. That's a very wide river that Shanghai has, and that's the people of Shanghai gathered for the Bund. That's Chengdu in China. That too has a fascinating riverfront. So it's not just the rich countries. And of course we have our own Marine Drive in Mumbai. That's a fantastic waterfront. What would Mumbai be without that sort of a waterfront? But what's important to remember is that these waterfronts did not always exist. Infrastructure was built, rivers were cleaned, and riverfronts were developed as meaningful public spaces. Take this example. That's a terrific example. That's London in 1795. Keep your eye on this building here, which is Somerset House. See, the Thames River is a tidal river. So the water goes up and down. And you can take the boats all the way in here, and the buildings used to be built so that you could take the boats directly in there. That's another view of Somerset House in 1870. By this time, London was already industrializing and starting to pollute its river. Here's a cartoon from the 1830s. And this is what they are talking about. This is all the sewage coming into the river, and the source of the waterworks for London is polluted by all this. They used to say that you could walk, the water was so thick you could walk on the Thames. In 1857 actually, the river got so polluted that they had to actually close down Parliament because you couldn't sit in Parliament. The Parliament House is on the river. It was stinking so much that they had to stop using. That's of course when you see some action usually, and Parliament gets stopped in that. And so this engineer called Patel here, who had already made plans for how some of these problems could be tackled, was pressed into action. And he started building in Victorian times the interceptor sewers and the embankments that are used by London even today. So that's Victorians. Victorians were great city builders. They had these terrible, terrible cities that you can read about in Charles Dickens and Karl Marx, etc. But they started building infrastructure like this and started building interceptor sewers and subways and embankments to transform their cities. And here you have Somerset House here, and that's the embankment built here. And inside this embankment is an interceptor sewer that started taking the sewage away towards the treatment plant. And soon after 1875, the trees started growing in that Somerset House at the back there, and that's what the embankment looks like. Today, if you go to London, that's Somerset House, and that's the edge of the river at this point. Because that's New York. It used to have an industrial waterfront here. Some of you might have seen this movie called Gangs of New York, and that shows what New York was like. But here's what it looks like today. That same industrial waterfront has been converted into a different city because the activities of the city have changed. Here's that same industrial waterfront in New York. You can see here, the boats used to come here. There were warehouses, industrial areas, and it got transformed. All of this land was filled up. As you can see here, it was filled up, and that's the new battery city that we built here. That's Singapore in the 1960s. That's a small river. It was a fishing, all sorts of fishing boats that used to be there. And that got transformed into something different as they went along. And that Chengdu in China, in 1993, it used the river passing through the city used to look like that, slums, industry, sewage, and today if you go, that's what Chengdu looks like. So cities go about transforming the river. Back to abused and neglected Sabarmati. So before I talk about the Sabarmati project, I need to explain to you the regional context because you need to understand the overall context in this the river functioning. So that's a wonderful map of the river basins of India. You can see these are all the river basins, and here is Ahmedabad that you can see. That's Gujarat, and if you go a little closer, that's Gujarat. That's the Aravalli Hills here. That's the Gulf of Champagne. That's the Sabarmati River. All the rainfall that falls in this area collects and gushes past Ahmedabad. So that's the catchment area. All the rainfall in this area gushes past Ahmedabad, and that's and goes further down and empties into the Gulf of Champagne. When in monsoon, Ahmedabad used to get severe floods, and that's the 1973 flood. You can see that's Nehru Bridge here, and that's that you can see the State Bank building, the Apna Bazaar building, Central Bank building, and the water was that high. Ahmedabad was really scared at that time, and Ahmedabad and the state government came together to build this important dam called Daroi Dam on here, and then subsequently 2 other dams were built on other rivers. So the entire catchment area here was brought in control. It was essentially a flood control project, and also it was meant to provide some irrigation and drinking needs downstream. But once these dams were built, there has been nothing but a natural flood in the Sabarmati. Whatever water comes here, for example here in 2006 you can see a lot of water in here. All of this comes through when the dam gate is open. So now there is no natural flooding. only flooding where the dam gates are open. So, at the same time as when the dams were built, a barrage was built downstream. A barrage is a shallow structure, shallow dam, with the gates open upwards. In a dam, the water flows from top of the dam. Here, it's open upwards. And this barrage was built as an irrigation project for the downstream areas. And this canal here, you can see Fatehwadi Canal. That's the canal that this barrage provided water to. So that's what the barrage looks like. And that's, you can see it's a very shallow wall. And that impounds water in the Sabarmati downstream of Ahmedabad. On account of this barrage, now after the monsoon, since 76, there was water stored in the river, and Ahmedabad had a temporary linear lake in the middle of the city. Because all this water got used up for irrigation. And as the water got used up for irrigation, it would empty out, and the river bed would once again become empty like this and be given over to activities of this sort. This is the dry river bed. Then something important happened. The Narmada Dam was built, and a canal was built from the Narmada Dam, which went all the way just upstream of Ahmedabad and went to North Gujarat and to Saurashtra. When such canals are built, to drain the canal in case of some calamity, they always provide some escape into natural water. So it was, when the canal was built like this, and this is Ahmedabad as you can see here, that's the river. And that's at this point where the canal goes below the river and on the other side, an escape and a siphon were provided, because of which it became possible to take water from the canal and put it into the river. Now, Ahmedabad had the possibility of having a perennial linear lake in the middle of the city. So this became the barrage here, and water. Now remember that the river slopes down from here to here. Once you build a wall here, then because it's a sloping bottom, the water has a flat surface. Here there is deep end, here's the shallow end, and after that if you were to fill in more water, it would just flow over. But you have a 15-kilometer long lake in the middle of the city. Now, that's your perennial lake in the middle of the city. Now remember that this is a dry landscape, and the natural impulse in this landscape has been to build lakes. Every village had its tank, and many of the Muslim kings of Ahmedabad built lakes for the city. So your Kantariya, your Sarkhet Talab, building lakes of this sort is a standard practice here. You store water in the monsoon and then use it the year around. And in some sense, this is Sarkhet. You can see Kantariya here. And now we had in a large city like this, a big lake in the middle of the city. Remember that none of this was done for Ahmedabad city. All of this happened as a consequence of flood control, irrigation projects, and various other such things. Ahmedabad had been trying to recast its relationship with the Sabarmati for a long time, because it had become an industrial city and was slowly transforming. One of the earliest attempts to recast this relationship was in 1961, when a French architect and a couple of other people in Ahmedabad, Bimal Patel to be precise, and a couple of engineers in the city, they got together and developed a proposal for developing the riverfront of Ahmedabad. It is quite understandable. Bimal Patel had started in Cambridge and come back, and Bernard Cohn was from Paris. It is not surprising that they would think of developing the Sabarmati River. At that time in 61, of course, there was no, in the early 60s, not exactly 61, but in the early 60s, there was no barrage. And so they had proposed a barrage. They wanted to use the land along the river for housing, and they wanted a big civic structure here in the middle. This was kind of a simple proposal, but that was the first idea where Ahmedabadis were saying, okay, we need to renegotiate our relationship. And of course, at that time, Ahmedabad, Gujarat also had a Prime Minister, Morarji Desai, and he was supportive of the idea. In 1973, the government of Gujarat did a lot of technical studies, and you can see in these technical studies, there were proposals for building embankments, reclaiming land from the river, and for building the barrage. And the 73 technical studies led to the building of the Vasna barrage. Then in 1976, a group of professionals in the city that included Rasu Vakil, who was head of CEPT, recently passed away, included Bimal Patel, who was also part of Mr. Tambe, etc. All of them got together and proposed to the municipal corporation that the riverfront should be developed. The idea that the riverfront should be developed is an old one in Ahmedabad. It just did not come to conclusion because at the time, Ahmedabad was declining. Its industry was going down. In 70s and 80s, Ahmedabad was doing very bad, even doing economically very poorly. In 1976, here's a magazine, Ahmedabad, where a lot of the ideas were discussed. And there was a lot of talk about doing something with the riverfront. Nothing came about because the time was just not right. Then Ahmedabad revived in the early 90s. This is very important. It revived economically, and its local government institutions were revived by some really capable leadership at that time. And a number of early projects that were taken up were, for example, the CG Road redevelopment, in which I was involved, and the PRTS. This was also started off in the early 90s. And at that same time, in 1997, the municipal corporation decided to set up a riverfront development company, and it is 100% owned by the municipal corporation. I've been involved in the project in its first conceptualization, where everything was looked at, from physical features of the river to river hydraulics, and you will understand that that designing an intervention of this sort requires looking at many different things. Land reclamation, embankments, land ownership, water retention, groundwater recharge infrastructure, slums, costs, revenues, lots of different things that we looked at, and a comprehensive proposal was produced in '98. After that, I served as the manager of the project for 6 years, and then subsequently as a detailed designer. In all these cases, I was leading teams of people. None of this gets done by individuals. This is many different people who have to come together as a team. So it's an environmental improvement, social development, urban rejuvenation project. There's 11 objectives. There's no one grand objective. They all work with one another, and you will see how they work. The first objective, of course, was to make the river accessible to everyone. I told you that over time, the entire edge of the river had become private, and it was impossible to walk along the edge of the river. So to create a public realm along the length of the river, what was decided was to build parallel embankments and reclaim land from the river. It's not possible to tear down the buildings on both sides, but if one remodeled the river, it was possible to get a sliver of land on both sides. You can see here, that's the bed of the river. Some places it is wide, some places it is quite narrow here. And all of this is historical because of erosion. Then the city has been built up on both sides, and now it's not eroding, but it's not fully eroded. And a number of studies said that a 275-meter waterway would be sufficient to let the flood pass through without, so the natural water carrying capacity of the river would remain unchanged if it was narrow in this manner. So some places where the river was wide, some places it was narrow, and if the embankments were big, some places you would get a lot of land, some places you would get very little. So this section explains that same idea. That's a bank of the river, you can see here. This is the high flood level. When the flood comes, water comes up to this level. That's the water impounded by the barrage. And I told you on one end that the barrage, near the barrage, the water is deep, the other end is shallow. So this is like an average water. This is the bed of the river, which is sandy. This is the stormwater drain through which there is sewage coming into the river. And this line here is important. This is public land that is privately owned land. That's an abstract sort of diagram for the thing. The first thing that had to be done was to take sand, mud from the bed of the river, put it here, make a construction platform that is just about 2 or 3 feet, 2 feet above the level of the water. That's not very complicated work, actually. Here you have boats pumping water and sand to one side, the water flows back, and the sand 10 meters into the bed of the river. It's about 60 centimeters wide. And in that, a concrete wall is built. Why 10 meters below? Because imagine that this is all flooded. This is the sand. That's the level up to which the scour occurs. And so the wall has to go below. See, when this wall gets covered, this sand here will push this wall out. And this is the anchor, the concrete anchor that anchors the wall back. And here it's pitched in the good soil at the bottom. So that's pretty simple. It's not very complicated work. That's trenches being dug in the construction platform. Heavy machinery, but not very complicated. And that's the trench being dug here. That's still the construction platform being done. And then there's concrete poured here and the slab is built all across up to this point. You can see here, that's the wall below. That's the slab built all across. And that's the water impounded at the level. So that's the low level. Now what you have to do is you have to build a wall that goes up to the high flood level and fill soil here to create new land at a higher level. So that's the retaining wall being built. This is around 2006, I think. That's, once again, not very complicated. Local contractors building up the concrete wall. So that's what the river used to look like in 1949. That's an aerial picture from 1949. You can see that's the walled city of Ahmedabad. Not much development on the other side. Then this is 2001, the year of the earthquake. The project hadn't started at that time. You can see the water impounded by the barrage here. 2002, that's the year of the earthquake. Nothing was happening in Ahmedabad. 2003, of course, nothing was happening. That's when the project really, the implementation started. 2004. And you can see here the construction platform being built up here. And some more of it being built. And finally, by 2009, the entire wall and the embankment had been done. 2011, a lot of the wall had been built, and 2013, that is conclusion. 2015, more or less done. The project essentially has converted a private river edge into a public river edge by providing Ahmedabad with a sliver of land that is open to the people to walk in. So in a sense, this is one of the biggest socialization projects. The private edge has been turned into a social property. And that's a picture from ASO a couple of years ago. The second objective was to stop the flow of sewage. Here you can see this used to be a very messy river. And that's the sort of black sewage, untreated sewage which used to come in. And these are the spots from which the sewage used to come in through the stormwater drains. And so, it's not possible to stop the sewage from coming in, because to do that you have to change the entire sewage network of Ahmedabad. What's done here is an interceptor sewer collects all the sewage on both sides from all these outfalls and takes it to the two sewage treatment plants that are located downstream of Ahmedabad. So that's the two sewage treatment plants which already existed, and they had to be augmented, and the pipe is, and the sewage is all piped up to these two sewage treatment plants, and these are two pumping stations that were built to take the sewage along. That's also not very complicated work. You can see that's the pipe, that's the sewage pipe embedded in the earthquake, and that's the stormwater drain comes here. The dribble of sewage falls in here and is taken downstream. And in the monsoon, when there is stormwater, it goes straight in, and the sewage is diluted by the stormwater. So that's the pipe being laid in the earthquake work, and that's the pipe being laid. And the flow of sewage into the suburbs, it has stopped more or less completely. There's a couple of places where the work is still pending, but it's completely stopped. And so now there is no direct sewage flowing back. The third objective was to recharge groundwater. Ahmedabad uses a lot of water. There's lots of and most of the water of Ahmedabad in western side and on the eastern side is pumped out of the ground. Now, if you take the water that is impounded by this linear lake in the middle of the city, it amounts to 12.5 billion liters of water. That's what is held in there. That's equivalent to 12.5 days of water used by Ahmedabad's 5 million people. 5 million people every day use water, and if you take 12.5 days of water supply, that's what it needs to fill up this lake. Once it's filled up, there is a loss on account of evaporation, and there is loss on account of seepage into the water. Evaporation is because of the heat, and you can see here 10 million liters per day on the hottest days. And 900 million liters of water seeps into the ground because of a sandy bed that the river has. Now this seepage is very good news, because the rest of the city is pumping water out the other side. So if you want to keep the lake full at all times, every day you need to put in 1,000 liters of water, 1,000 million liters of water per day. Presently, this water comes from the Narmada Canal. The Narmada Canal provides water to put in. But the long-term plan is a little different. Actually, Ahmedabad generates 800 million liters per day of sewage. If this sewage is treated to a good level, and instead of throwing the sewage downstream of us, if you were to put it back in, then this whole project becomes a grand recharge project. What you really are doing is all of Ahmedabad is pumping water, gets water from further afield, also pumping water from the ground up, uses it, turns into sewage, treats the sewage, pull it back into the bed, the river bed, and that seeps down into the ground. So that's the long-term plan. Of course, not all the treated sewage water will come from these two plants. AMC is already building a decentralized plant here, so that water from the Shaipa Gate, Dafnala that comes in, that will be treated and put directly back into the river. So that becomes the recharge of the river. So it's not as if Ahmedabad will be dependent on Narmada forever. Presently, Narmada water is available, so they use it. But eventually, this is how the lake stays full. The fourth objective of the project was to provide housing for riverbed slumlords. I told you that there were many slums, many pockets of slums along the river. They're not great living conditions, you can see here. There's constant, in the monsoon there's threat of flooding, so there's no services here. It's not very healthy to live here. And of course the people don't have tenure, so they are paying, they're on constant threat of eviction, or have to deal with the people who manage, and the slumlords who manage the rental market in the slums. So here's during the floods, and then every time in the monsoon, people will be worried that the houses will get flooded, and therefore they will not release water from the dam. Then they would keep waiting, and then they would suddenly release, and the houses would get damaged again. This was a pretty nasty, awful condition. Here, the living conditions were not very great at all. Initially, a very quick reconnaissance survey was done, and that's from the original report. And all these yellow pockets are slum pockets here. And within the project area, which is the riverbed, there were 10,000 households that were estimated to be in the project area. Because some of the slums went deep in to the city and then came on the back. That overall in these slums there might be a little more, but in the project area there were 10,000 households. Subsequently in 1999, an extremely detailed socio-economic survey was done. And this, every family was met with to find out different aspects about their life. And this estimated, this survey finally told us that there are approximately 11,000 households, not 10,000. To cut a long story short, the riverfront project had these slums which are in blue along the river. All these slums, all the households in these slums were moved to new relocation houses in all these sites that you can see here. 19 different sites. This was land in the city. You can see it's well within the city here, most of it was belonging to the municipal corporation in which houses were built. The entire process was of course monitored by the High Court. The plan was that once the houses are built, families will be moved to these places. And here is a allotment fair where the families are being, there's a lottery for which place you get the housing, etc. And the houses, the housing colonies look like this here. And the cost of individual houses was 4,50,000 rupees at that time. The beneficiaries paid 66,000. And if you consider the land value, the market value of each house was 10 lakh rupees, or 6 lakh rupees for the land, and the rest of it. So, in 19 relocation sites, eventually 10,046 houses were allotted. And the market value of this sort of housing that was provided was 1,000 crores. Just keep that number in mind because I'm going to talk about it later. So these 19 relocation sites have not all fared equally well. Many have fared extremely well. Here you can see a family in one of the houses, and here's another one. And that's what some of the housing looks like. I had nothing to do with the design of this. I think the design could have been much better. But that's the way the housing came out. And many of the people's lives have improved significantly after that. And you can find many happy scenes. There are also many places where the housing colonies have not worked out as well, and they have they're not in good condition. There's lots of crime in these places, but not all of them. Definitely. So this project, in a sense, has created housing for 11,000 slum dwellers for now. The fifth objective of the project was to reduce the risk of erosion and of flooding. And you must understand, Sabarmati is a very shallow river. In some of the areas, such as this area here, is a low line area. There's a big flood. Paldi would always get flooded. It was very standard. And you can see here the section of the river. It's like just a very shallow river, wide but not very deep at all. And the Sabarmati's banks are sandy, very loose soil, and easily prone to erosion. So everybody who could, in response to floods like this, anybody who could had built walls. If you had money, you built a wall. If you didn't, the land got washed out like this land here. Gandhi Ashram survives only because of this massive wall which was built in the 1960s. If this wall had not been built, Gandhi Ashram would have got washed out long ago. In fact, last year, this brick wall which was existing there came down because of the floods. And what the project has done by building one sort of common wall, what it has done is protected Ahmedabad from the floods. This is 2015, and you can see here the lower promenade is submerged. This is submersible that meant to be submerged. And that's the flood, and that's what it looks like after the flood has receded. That's the water. So, in many ways, one of the objectives of the project is well achieved, which is to protect Ahmedabad from floods and from erosion. Then the sixth objective of the project was to create different parks and promenades. You see here, Ahmedabad lacks in parks and gardens. The density, it's not like Delhi, doesn't have great parks. And one of the key ideas was to use all the land that has been created to make parks. So, if you look at the master plan, almost 50% of the land is parks and promenades and public spaces where people can walk and enjoy the river. These are some early visualizations. So this is from you can see Patani Riverfront here. This here, the wall is built, but the earthfill has not been done. This is already a sewage flowing here. This will all be built up eventually. But when to imagine what this place would be, this is a drawing that was done. It shows a long park here. That's the lower promenade. That's Patani Restaurant. That's sort of an imagination of what life would be in a place. Here's Patani Restaurant, and here's imagination of what. In this place, there's no wall. There's only the fourth wall, and see the steps coming down. That's like what the place could be. Or here, when the wall was being built, there are trees coming up here, and you can visualize that. That's the rendering that shows the trees and a marathon happening here. And here's where the sample stretch was done. The trees have not grown as yet, but someday the trees will grow, and in the shade, this will be a quiet place of the sort. And here, with a temple, and you will have a Ganesh Visarjan, and this is already happening. Ganesh Visarjan is this area. And that's Gandhi Ashram. That's an imagination of what it could be once the water is clean and the trees have grown. That's Gandhi Ashram steps. You can see that there's a big, massive gate stopping entry of people from the river into Gandhi Ashram. And someday, these gates will go, and this will be a place. So it's not very far. The trees have to grow. And here at the far end, near the sewage treatment plant, there's lots of land. And perhaps a Maidan can be made there with 3 large sports fields. And of course, many of these places, as you know, are already in place. And that was in 2012 when the first trees were planted and the sample stretch was opened up. People would come and discover a spot like this and suddenly say, oh my God, that's a lovely place. And this was the first stretch which was opened up. This was also a picture from 2012. People coming here, discovering the place, enjoying the water. Here's the Kite Festival in 2012. And the newspaper reports, once again 2012, talking about people enjoying the front in the monsoon. And here's another one. You're boating, and you have lots of young people find this as a quiet place in which people enjoy, meet each other. This is certainly not the place where the richest people come. Really where the poor people come. It's public space where people come. I mean, you can see here there are different sorts of people. Of course, many of the elite also go there for jogging and running. And there's also other poor people, different communities mixed with. That's what the spot is. There's boating, and people come there for exercises, taking walks. And this woman here says that she comes here to study. I don't really believe that. There's a family going out for a walk. So what used to be a bed like this, that's Reserve Bank here, that's Patani Restaurant. And you can see that that's what that's become. Slowly as the park is developing. That's the park along Subhash Bridge. Of course, this is also from 4 years ago, and the trees have grown. So I don't know, some of you might have been there. It's a 1.5 kilometer long new park that is used quite extensively. That's the new flower garden that has been done by the municipal corporation. And that's become a big event for the municipal corporation. And that's the flower garden at night. And I don't always approve of what the things that are there, but it's terrific to see the use that, the excitement around the use. There's a park that has been planned in Kanpur. This is Kama Hotel here, and that's about 1 kilometer long. And that's a park that, once done, will look like this. That you can sit on this grassy bank here and watch the sunset on the other side. And so you can see here 1 million square meters of parks, promenades, and plazas have been added to Ahmedabad. Then the idea is also to create cultural, trade, and social benefit. Here in this place, you have this concentration of trade fair complex here. This is still to be built, it's coming up. I'll just show you. Moving. Okay, that's a trade fair facility. So that's the that's the trade fair facility. You can see that's a section of a large exhibition hall along the river. And that's the length of the exhibition facility here. Seems to be some problem. Okay, so that's a trade fair facility, and that's a view of the trade fair facility that we created. On the other side of the trade fair facility is the riverfront. The entire end along the port wall is now the Sunday market. That's the visualization of the Sunday market. You see the port wall on the other side, trade fair facility on the right hand side. And that's the Sunday market as it takes place today. That's a huge flea market, 4 or 5 times the size of the original one. You see that's where lots of trees have been planted here. At some point it's been completely shaded. And that was a visualization in here. That's what it looks like. There are lots of umbrellas being used right now, but eventually it will be completely shaded by trees. At the far end here is a laundry campus, a place where the dhotis on the riverbed have found new facilities. From the riverbed, the relocated. Trade and social amenities, this open land is now used extensively by the city, but the eighth objective was to revitalize riverfront neighborhoods and precincts that are planned on both sides of the river. This one, for example, is the Ashram Road precinct, which there's a new plan for the CEPT in place, which would see, after metro is built, a lot of new buildings being built in the center of town. You see here, that's what the riverbed used to look like. This is just a quick visualization to see the amount of space that might come up. That's what it looks like today. You see here, this is what it used to be. That's what it looks like today. And as the buildings at the back come up slowly and the buildings on the riverfront come up, that's how the skyline will change over the town. And of course, the project is already spurring development of adjacent areas by adding new buildings. Many of you might have seen how the developers on both sides are advertising their buildings with front views. Ninth objective was to improve Ahmedabad's street network. You look at the street network of Ahmedabad, the north-south link, particularly the east, was extremely poor. You could really not go north-south, and you would have very difficult time doing that. And so some of the land that was here was used for providing 2 parallel streets on both sides. Wherever possible, they were away from the edge of the river, wherever there was very little land, they were along the river. And they are connected now, and I was surprised to see how many people were of course, happy that this connection was down. So that's what the streets look like along the front, you can see. And here's another one where the bridges and the streets are connected. Many people who go across daily find these connections very useful. The 10th objective was to pay for the riverfront development. What you have to understand is that the project is a self-financing project. It's a self-financing project. The land that was created, about 53%, 54% is parks, gardens, promenades and open spaces. About 11% is for public utility areas like the trade fair, etc. You can see here, Sunday market, event grounds. So you can see here that's public utility area. So about 64% land is used for all sorts of public spaces. 19% is for streets and 14.5%, the blue spots, is allotted for sale. And once it is sold, this is the money that helps pay for the entire project. So it's a completely self-financing project. So, of course, this is the land that is to be sold for new developments. Is strict urban design guidelines for what sort of buildings will come up here. That's some early model made to figure out what buildings will look like. Now, here's some interesting information. The land to be reclaimed is 204 hectares. What is to be sold is 29 hectares. Amount of floor space that will be built will be 1 million square meters. All of this is just numbers. But what's important is that presently the building has cost 850 and 400 for the project. It's about 1,200 crores for the project and 1,000 crores for the housing. Some of you might not understand what these numbers mean. So let me explain what these numbers mean. A 5-star hotel in Mumbai or Delhi would cost 1 to 1.5 crores per room. And so a 300-bed hotel will cost you 500 crores. So 500 to 600 crores. That's what 5-star hotel in Mumbai or Delhi cost. The entire project has cost, the construction of it, the interest cost, the two together, have cost 2 5-star hotels. So it's really not an expensive project. What's also interesting is that almost as much money as is being spent on the project has been spent on the housing. So the amount of housing that you create is 1,000 crores of housing. And together, today, about 2,250 crores have been spent on the project. When the project is complete, when all the gardens are finished and everything is done, it will cost about 3,250 crores approximately. And from the sale of land, they will recover 3,500 crores. So cash profits is never been the purpose of this project. In fact, originally 20% of the land was to be sold, but when they discovered that the land will sell for more, they reduce the amount that is to be sold. So originally 20%, now 14%. So it's basically the sale of the land is seen as a way of financing the project. So spots like this, which are next to bridges, they fetch a good land value, and so those are the ones that are to be sold. To sell a piece like that, you can get that whole park for free. That's the riverfront building that is coming up right now, and the development of the riverfront has already started. Sale of land is not happening. Now, 11th and finally, the final objective of the project was, multiple. And now, the output is the first one was to bring Ahmedabad together around the large civic project. It's really a very fundamental thought. You can see the project at different levels. It was to build Ahmedabad's capacity to tackle complex urban problems. Most Indian cities feel that, and most Indians feel that these complex problems simply cannot be solved. And one of the objectives was to show that they can be. And to show that even in our spirited democracy, often very fractured, it is possible to make solutions of complex problems. So these are all the objectives. Of course, this meant building consensus, talking about the project with people, So you can see here, that's the man who actually started the project off. He's a local politician. This must have been in '95 when the project was just being thought out, and he's explaining to a group of people from the newspaper. Endless such meetings were done to explain to the people what the project would be like. Here's me, much younger, explaining to people what the technical aspects of the project was. This is at the Chamber of Commerce, where all the businessmen were explained to what the project is. Of course, they felt that there was no need to make any housing for a slum. And when we showed it to the NGOs, they felt there was no need to sell the land. So we got lots of different reactions from lots of different people. That's a workshop for professionals in the city. You can see Mr. Patel here. That's Bernard Cole, who was invited. You can see here that's the Congress mayor of the city. For a long time, nobody thought the project, such project could be done. So you can see here in 2000, they're still saying Riverfront project may finally seem like a day. Then we had the earthquake, then we had the riots, nobody thought anything would happen. Finally, we got a nod, and in 2002, it won an important award that was important, that helped push the project forward. And in 2004 actually, it finally got going. And at that time, the local government, of course, was Congress, and the state government was BJP. It's very much seen as a city project, and one of the earliest things that was done at that time was to ensure that it becomes a city project when everybody is involved in it. Then there was in 2006, after the work had started, there was a lot of flooding, and a lot of people got scared. The entire hydraulic study was done once again. Of course, such a project involves the entire city in a sort of a discourse. And here are pictures from that. And then they say they're pouring river rises from the mouth. Here's the vibrant Gujarat celebrations where the project was presented. That's the model presented here. That's the plan, the project. Lots of people would come and see an exhibition like this. Of course, along with them would also come the rich people. That's you know who that is, deciding what they're going to buy along here, I guess. And here, your newspapers talking about it. They see Manhattan in the making. This project has involved the city in making various ways. Because the NGOs have been very active and very important in ensuring that the riverfront slum plans, relocation plans get implemented. So there's High Court, the public interest litigations against the plan. Then the High Court, acted very constructively, said that we're going to stop the project. What we're going to do is ensure that the plans are implemented, and that went on. Then there was some people who were with this spurious claim that the Sabarmati Riverfront project is going to wipe out the stock market. This went on for a few days in the newspaper. And then the mayor and everybody had to come out there and say, no, it is always going to be there, it was going to be there. A discourse like this is precious. Welcome on. Everybody jumps in. Here you have somebody complaining that this is for the builders, it's not for the citizens at all. For such people were often the people who had to lose most from the public, socialization. And here you have more open spaces. Then you have to go back in there and talk about how actually it's not for less land for business on the riverfront, showing that it's actually not meant to be a commercially driven project. Then at one point the newspapers were making such terrible illustrations of the project that we decided to make better illustrations, learn how to draw pictures and images that would speak to people. That's when we developed the techniques for doing these sort of renderings. That's the spot here. It's exactly at this spot what it would look like. And that's a 3D model with all sorts of fine arts people, etc. going there imagining life in the future. This is the building that's actually being built right now. Then we have to show that presently there's a slum, but someday you have a right day of this sort here. And make them into large renderings. That's at the Ufa here at the back. Take an exhibition of this sort and show people what this riverfront is going to be like. And people will come to the exhibition and ask questions like this about the project. So this project is all about bringing the Sabarmati back to October and October back to Sabarmati. So thank you very much.
And my question to you is that what was that, if you had to attribute the success of the implementation of the project to that one act or a series of acts that possibly that made the implementation of the project possible? Because you said that since 1961 there have been different proposals and there's been enough effort being made for this project to happen, but something triggered in 1997, 98 that made sure that
You know, this is the question that a lot of cities ask when they come here, and people from many different cities of India come here to see the project. The key question we ask is how was Ahmedabad able to pull it off? How was Ahmedabad able to make such a project happen? This answer can be given at 3 levels, I think. The first level is that even though ideas had been proposed earlier, the time was simply not right. Ahmedabad was declining economically in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and in a declining city, it's very difficult to take up sort of projects of this sort. So economically, Ahmedabad revived in the 90s, and that was an important moment. Also, India was generally neglecting cities up to the 1990s, and state policy very consciously was saying the cities are not where, not that important. It's the rural areas we must focus on. By the 90s, urbanization had progressed enough to make politicians feel that cities were important. Also, it was clear that new economic growth in India, which is essential for poverty alleviation, is only going to come from cities, not from agriculture. So cities had sort of been brought into the sort of main agenda of the nation. So that was, so in a sense, the time was right. The second thing that you need is some of the strategies that we have. And I think the municipal corporation made some very important correct strategies at the time. They created a special purpose vehicle so that the project could actually be insulated from changes in government. In the special purpose vehicle, they included opposition as well as the ruling party. So they were inclusive. An inclusive special purpose vehicle, but not the municipal corporation itself. So that was the institutional strategy. It was a self-financing project, not dependent on taxpayer money. So you are not at the mercy of budgets. You can borrow money, do the project. So in the early days of the project, what was extremely important that the management was outsourced. Because the municipal corporation, you know, people, it's very common for people to say there's no political will in the country. I've worked enough, and I know there's lots of political will. There are lots of people in positions of power who want to get things done. What's really lacking is management capacity. Management capacity to translate will into action. So you have a municipal corporation officers who are very good, but very, they're busy with crisis and managing crisis and immediate urgent needs of the city. So you have to outsource from it. That was the start. So the time has to be right. The second thing is that the strategy. Then of course, the next important thing is individuals matter. It's not as if individuals don't matter. So there happened to be a great leadership, both in the bureaucracy and in the politics. You had Mr. Surendra Patel, who was treasurer of the BJP at that time and in charge of the municipal government on the politician side, and Keshav Verma, and subsequent municipal commissioners who provided leadership. So individuals also matter. Okay. So there are these 3 levels at which one can think about it, and that is why it comes about.
time for Bangladesh. So I would like to thank you for this presentation. To clarify all the contradictions I heard when I arrived in Ahmedabad. So we have a similar situation in Dhaka. We have a river at the center of the city, Buriganga River, and it's almost dead. So to revive a dead river, you have to struggle a lot. So I want to ask a question. What about the blockage you mentioned at two end of the river? Sometimes you refer to it as a lake or some kind of canal. So what happens when you will put some blockage at two ends, and what's the outcome?
So note that the blockade is not at two ends. The river is sloping down. You just need to build a wall on this side. Then you get essentially a swimming pool. Note also that this barrage was built for irrigation. There are hundreds of such barrages built across the country on many rivers. All they do is to store up water at the back. It's called you have these check dams. Well, this is a check dam, only it's a bigger check dam. So it's just a check dam that holds water. It used to hold monsoon water, then would become empty. Now it holds water throughout the year. So it's like a linear lake in the middle of the city, much like Sarkhej or like Kankaria. These are much celebrated examples of lake building in this area. So this is, when you have a city of 6 million people, this river, the surface area of the lake is like 22 Kankaria lakes. Kankaria lake was built when there was 100,000 people in the city. This is like 22 lakes when there are 5 to 6 million people. It's just one big lake in the middle of the city. Once again, it wasn't built for the project. The lake was existing. The project makes use of the opportunities that were created by the irrigation dam. Okay, so that is, when you first said the word blockade, I thought you were going to ask me what was the main opposition to the project. And let me tell you a little bit about that. In the early days of the project, when it was proposed, the fiercest opponents were two sets of people. One was the MLAs, members of Legislative Assembly, who had their constituencies along the river. They were from the ruling party and the party that wanted to do the project, but they were the ones who were most opposed. And the reason was pretty simple. They had these slums in their constituencies which were captive vote banks. These were the places from which you would get your vote. If you had a deal with the local Dada, then you got the votes from it. And this project was going to take the slums out of there and relocate people in different places. So they were really upset, and they didn't want this project to happen because they didn't want their captive vote banks to be dismantled. Okay. Of course, the only solution is that somebody above them has to say, shut up, we're going to do this. And that is what happened. The other set of people who were most apprehensive, I wouldn't say were so cynical, but they were the NGOs who were working in those same slums. All the slums were divided up between the different NGOs. Okay. Now the politicians had networked into the slums to, and these people had NGOs who also spent a lot of energy building up networks in the community, doing community development work, etc. These were places that they knew, the communities they were familiar with. And I must say they weren't also very happy with the proposal because it would disrupt all the work that was done. And some of them were, not all of them were like, but some of them were genuinely worried that these people will not get what they were promised. Of course, they put a lot of pressure through the High Court. I think they then played a very, very positive role in ensuring that the people got the benefits. What was unfortunate is, I think, while this project is very progressive compared to the projects, it's extremely progressive in its relocation housing, because here, all projects used to be done by just bring people out. In this case, they created 11,000 houses, and this spends huge amount of money, gets transferred to all these households. What was not still understood at that time was how much community development support you got to provide after people are moved. Because when people are moved, of course it disrupts their lives. Many things, but in the short term, a lot of things get disrupted. And you need a lot of community development support, soft support. And perhaps with the new projects, Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation will learn more about how to do this better.
Bimal, now that you are talking about this relocation housing, when you show before the map of where those settlements were relocated, I saw that most of them were in the eastern bank of the river, and you specified that there was municipal land. Can you explain a little bit further what was the strategy to found those places and why there is no resettlement in the western part?
Okay, first of all, it's not as if there isn't. If you look at the total number of households on the eastern and west sides, on the eastern sides there were a lot more households. So there's one natural reason why all of them would prefer to be on the eastern side. On the western side, there is large housing also. But most of the project affected people were near the Wadaj area, and the housing is all there. So there was care taken to see that the relocation housing is not very far away. So most of it on the eastern side. Now on the eastern side, a lot of old textile mills that had closed down. The land of it, half of the land of the textile mills was appropriated by the municipal corporation. And that was the land bank which was used to create the new housing. So many of the new housing pockets were in the eastern side because the mills were on the eastern side, because the households were on the eastern side. So there was there's no imbalance of that sort. Most of the slums on the western side were in Bharat and in Paldi. The two have been moved more or less where those housing pockets are.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Abhilasha. I'm studying MCAM here. So I have this question. I come from Chennai, where actually two rivers, in fact, getting degraded, almost dead, and we are not able to do anything about it. So happy that this has happened. But my question is that we have been speaking about NGOs, support from politicians, what the professionals, the effort the professionals have taken to make this project a reality. But I would like to have some light about the role of the people of Ahmedabad in this project. Because this is a project which has given a lot to the city, and it should have obviously had both support and opposition from the citizens of the, So what was the role of the Ahmedabadis in this project?
So, from the beginning, see, when politicians are involved and they want to do a project, and if you have a democracy, they have their pulse on the popular opinion. What they really want is for people to feel that the politicians and the municipal corporation is doing something. So all through, a lot of effort was made to sort of inform the people about what's happening here, what's going on. Of course, there was also people who were opposed to the project for various reasons. There were different reasons, different sometimes because of poor communications, because they don't understand what's going on, sometimes they genuinely believe that something different should be done. So there are many reasons why people oppose it also. And the press would be there covering both sides. So if the project has moved ahead, it has moved ahead because eventually the politicians saw that there was popular support for the project. And as time has gone by, the popular support for the project has increased more and more, particularly as people realized. If we were to do this project again, one of the key things we would do was to try and involve people much earlier in a much deeper way. Okay? Not necessarily always to ask, you ask, but very quickly you will find out, if you're a planner, you will find out that some people want it this way, other people want it this way, and the job of the planner is to find what is that middle ground that will, take you through. But it always helps to have greater, better, more communications. And I'm finding that that our local institutions are not good at doing that, and our professionals are not good at doing it. And so that's what I would deepen a lot more. That sort of thing. CEPT.
Hello sir, myself Ritesh here. I want to know about the other problem. What was the other major problem you have faced rather than the slum dwellers and the politicians during this construction of this project? Major problems, yes sir.
Oh, many, absolutely many different. I mean, many small problems. All that had to be tackled. I think that. What would I list as once the project started rolling, okay, one time that we had a major issue was with the floods. Most people do not understand flood hydraulics. Most of them feel that if you narrow a river, you are reducing its flood carrying capacity. Okay? You are narrowing the flood carrying capacity of the river if you narrow it. You're reducing flood carrying capacity if you narrow the river. And when we had flood in the river in 2006, a lot of people felt that this project is actually going to increase flooding. So at that stage, a lot of effort had to be made to counter that opposition to the project. Okay. There was in addition to this, I think, just the lack of familiarity with this sort of a complex urban redevelopment. I mean, there's not a sort of project that a lot of people, in the West, these sort of projects get done on a regular basis. And nobody even talks about them, they just happen very quickly. It's no big achievement in a sense. But here this is, in many ways, a pioneering project. So a lot of people, there's just no capacity in the municipal corporation to understand. I mean, I include everybody who is managing the project. They have no idea of what to do first, what to do next, how to do it, how to tackle issues that come up. So that learning, building up experience was, so the lack of experience was in a sense a problem that one would talk about. There were these sort of things.
So, is there any other options creating barriers or dams to stop the flood?
Sorry?
Is there another option to control the flood by not creating dam, something like that?
You see, this is, of course. You see, if you look at the larger context, and which you must, I mean, if you look at the larger context, the river in the entire ecosystem in which it exists. As the rain falls from the Aravalli hills and then comes down, on both sides, because of intense agriculture and a lot of deforestation on both sides, the amount of water that flows directly into the river has increased. This is true for rivers across the world. As societies start using riparian areas for agriculture, the runoff, the stormwater runoff into the rivers increases. And as a consequence, the amount of water that comes gushing down in the river is a lot more. If you really want to reduce the amount of flooding that happens in the river, then you have to do a lot of, you have to change the geography on both sides of the river for 200 kilometers from here. And that is indeed something that needs to be done. That's sort of whole ecological, environmental sort of transformation all along the river as you go up. That's a long-term agenda that one must do. Often, nobody will wait for that sort of long-term agenda. They'll say there is a need for a flood. I mean, if you saw the picture of the flood in '73, you can understand why Ahmedabad people panic and they say, okay, let's just build a dam that will bring the river, the flooding into control. And indeed it has. I mean, it would not be possible. What's important to remember that in the stretch that passes through the river, through the city, the river stretch that passes through the city, you know, as the city grows on both sides and starts abusing, in some ways, you have to now protect the river from the city. It's almost as if it's an artery that is getting choked up on both sides, and you have to put a stent in there. And that's essentially the nature of what has to be done right across. That's
On that ecological note, I thought it was really beautiful to have that symbolic year, 1857, which was the big uprising here, that the British Parliament had to close down because of the smell. If you look at the bigger perspective of, let's say, the quality of the water and the development of European cities, at a certain moment it was possible for people to swim again in the river, and it was possible to have certain species of fish who had not been around for many, many years, who returned. In an optimistic scenario, Bimal, how do you see that happening for Ahmedabad?
Well, you know, I keep imagining that Singapore treats its sewage water up to a level where you can drink it. So if you go to the sewage treatment plant in Singapore and you visit it, they'll give you the water that is treated and say drink, because it's extremely well treated, well managed. But most of the people who go from here, no, we don't believe you, it cannot be done. And they bring the water back like Ganga Jal or something, but they don't really drink it. I don't see the reason why this will not be possible someday. I think someday Ahmedabad will be able to develop its capacity to treat the water well and be possible to swim. I know people in Ahmedabad, there's one guy who loves boating and he says, I have a kayak and I'm going to go kayaking. I say, hold on, wait, the water is still not clean enough. But someday it will be possible to kayak, to swim in the river. I don't see any reason why that's not possible.
Sir, I'm Anuja. I have heard that the city of Ahmedabad is being branded by Sabarmati Riverfront Project. And if the statement is right, I have a doubt whether the project, whether it was it was major aim among the, was it an aim you had, or to what extent does the project help in branding the city?
Absolutely no sense of using it for branding. In 1994, nobody even believed that such a project could be done. And the idea that Ahmedabad would use a complex project like this to brand itself, they would have, most people thought this was a nutty idea, it's never going to happen. So in the origins, there was no such idea. I mean, there were different people motivated in different ways. There was the person who set the ball rolling, was the local politician here in charge of the municipal corporation. He set the ball rolling because he's an engineer and he had heard of Bernard Cohn's proposal because his friend used to work in Bernard Cohn's office. So he knew that something like this is possible. So he said, oh, I think we should do something like that. I was a planner and an urban designer, intensely interested in actually making some improvements happen on the ground. I was not going to be happy with just drawing some pretty pictures, and which is why I was willing to become the manager of the project. So for me, the motivations were that sort. Nobody in their wildest imagination thought that this project could be used to brand Ahmedabad. Now that said, this project is going to go on for another 200 years, or 100 years, or whatever Ahmedabad exists. Like the Thames River or Paris River, and these sort of projects, what is important to remember, this is just the beginning. This is just the foundation in a sense. Just in the way that the Thames waterfront has been continuously redone and changed, in the way the Paris waterfront is changed, I'm sure the next generation is going to change it. Many people say, why do you build concrete? Couldn't you have stone? Because there was no money for stone. It could be stone. There was no money for stone to build it with stone. But that doesn't mean that someday somebody will not come and either clad it in stone or rebuild sections of the wall, because it doesn't cost a hell of a lot to do that. Okay? Or in other places, as the flood management improves over a period of time. Okay? And because the dam management, once it improves, there will be not so much water, and the wall height that has been built will not be required. And you will be able to change the wall and cut it up and make it all sorts of, you could make it look like arts in various places, and you could build step wells and do various things with it. What's difficult for a lot of people who are design oriented to understand is that you shouldn't see these projects and whatever is being done as the end state. You see this as a process, because these sort of projects go on and on. And when you're involved in city building and city transformation, the key thing to remember is you're not trying to make something perfect forever. These are things that are going to change. In every generation, the next generation can say, that fellow was nutty, he didn't know what to do. He wasn't, they didn't know, that earlier generation didn't know what to do. We're going to do something different. That's the nature of things. What's important is that we take the first step and start tackling the problems. Because once we start, in that process, upward spiral can start. Otherwise, it's just a downward spiral of everybody's cynical and talking about things that can't be done, rather than talking about what is possible and how you might do it better next time, or the same thing, how it can be improved. So I think that's a. So I don't think in the project, at least I don't see it as a branding project. It was not meant to make Ahmedabad vibrant. It was not a branding project at all. It was genuinely to show that complex problems can be solved. And we will indeed have to. I mean, look at our cities. We'll have to make them livable. We'll have to make them work better. And it's precisely projects like this with lots of different expertise coming together. That's what we need, and a positive attitude to what can be done.
Hello, sir. I'm Shravati. I'm a thesis student at CEPT. I want to know about how the rehabilitation took place. There have been similar projects in Mumbai where they rehabilitate these slum dwellings into new housing properties, housing spots. And what they do is they rent those spots to earn money because their house, their place they were living in before generated a kind of income for them, and they settled there because of a reason. So I want to know that when this relocation of the slum dwellers was happening, was there a screening process, or were they given a choice where they want to relocate themselves, or was it like, this person, this family gets this call?
So you raised a number of issues. One of them is, yes, of course they were living there for the reason, in the slum. And that reason was that they had no other choice. If they could afford houses in formal rental market, who would want to live in those conditions? So they stayed there for a reason. That reason was that the formal housing market was not available. That's why slums develop in any city. The formal housing is unaffordable, so you have this sort of housing on land that nobody else wants to use. That's why they were there. I didn't understand, I could not understand the part where you said they had an income from their houses. The slum dwellers had an income from their...
Over the years, no, not like living there. I mean, like over the years, they must have some occupational engagement that they will be engaged in. So they must have developed some kind of ways of earning money. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. So I understand now what you mean. So they, when they are living in that spot, that from there they have jobs in the vicinity, is what you're talking about. And indeed that is true, that many of them might have had jobs in the neighborhood because they don't have money for transportation and they have to walk to work. And so perhaps they have jobs in nearby areas. And when you take the people and you move them even 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers away, that really disrupts that aspect. That's a disruption, and that's a sort of negative impact on their life when they move to another place. There's also positive aspects. The positive aspects are that you get a house that is your own and you cannot be evicted, with clean water supply, you get drainage, both of which did not exist. You have no threat of flooding. So all of these are items of expense. If you're going to live in a slum and you fall sick regularly, you lose your income on a regular basis. And you also have to spend on medicines. If you have a threat of flooding, every monsoon, a family like that has to spend on plastic sheets. That's a cost that you have. Almost always in these slums, there are slumlords who are charging rent from the people, protection money. So they have, when you move to a new house somewhere, all these costs go down. Your transport costs perhaps go up. In the initial years, there's bound to be disruption. And you will find, and we found in many, many places people would, but everybody makes the calculation in their head. And all of them are saying, I'm getting a 10 lakh rupee house in my name. Okay? I mean, I'll take it. Which is why almost all of the relocation was voluntary. The people sort of opted to take up the house. Once they were taken up, how to allot houses where, a lot of it was done. I mean, these are all difficult questions, and a lot of improvements are possible on these sort of processes. Okay? So, in fact, the learnings from the project are really of this sort. How do you improve these processes? I mean, you saw that allotment fair. Very peaceful allotment fair where they have a lottery of some sort and say whether you get it on the 4th floor or whether you get it on the ground floor or first floor, which building will you get it in, etc. These processes can all be improved. But by and large, they have worked. Because if you go to many of the colonies, you find neighbors have been able to choose, groups of people have been able to stay right next to each other. All the houses were allotted in the name of the woman of the household, not in the name of the man. And you go there, by most accounts that I have got, most of the people are not sold out. They're still living there. Because first of all, it's not legal to sell, but this is like too important to let go of. And many of the families are doing extremely well. Saw some of those pictures. I've been places myself. it's very interesting to study which communities have done well, which ones haven't. So I'm generalizing a bit, but where there were Muslim sort of concentration of Muslim households, and this division was asked for by the people, not forced by government. Where there are Muslim households in Muslim neighborhoods, those colonies are doing really well. Where there are Hindus in Hindu colonies, it's a little tougher because the neighborhood sees you as lower caste and does not want you in that. So on and so forth. 3 years down the line, I mean, most of this has well. I mean, it's not been so disruptive as to cause tremendous political problems. As you know, for the politicians, the proof is successful implementation of the project resulted in successive municipal, state government victories. So we have a democracy, and that's a good thing. Things don't work out, they're going to fight back. And you will see that in the debate. So that's the story. One of the things that really needs to be done is a really good systematic study of the entire process. But objective study of some sort. It sort of tells you not really good, bad, but what could be better? What could have been done better? Which of the processes could have been better? And I think this project is a big advance on what used to be done earlier. But there is so much that can be improved all across. The entire entitlement process also, I know there were a lot of problems in that, and that could have been better. But there were many, many positive aspects. And the proof is that you have 11,000 families that have houses. The project's benefits are quite widespread. The parks and gardens for the middle classes, also the promenades serve as important places for poor people, the public spaces for poor people. There's housing for poor people. There's real estate development opportunities for businessmen of the city. Most people like those streets where they find that their road length has been reduced. And different people see different things. By and large, it's a project that people are proud of, and that's of course nice to know. But you might have your own views about that.
Okay, the last question. Bimal, you explained beautifully the way this project is benefiting the city of Ahmedabad. If you try to see, this project is only a small segment of the river, the Sabarmati. So, do you think this project has transformed river, or does it have impact on maybe the upstream or downstream of Sabarmati River?
I don't think that the project has had any impact on upstream or downstream, negative or positive, upstream or downstream, because really the river is passing through the city. It's really affecting. It's a 250 kilometer river, and 10 kilometers of this project. This is sort of not have a big effect. You must also understand that this project is a municipal project. And the municipal corporation is interested in its city. Its charter says very clearly, your money comes from the city, and think about your city. Really thinking about the entire river basin is the state government's mandate in a sense. And sadly, we've still not started thinking about those issues. That's the sort of issues that regional planners or regional environmentalists would start thinking about. And I think that will have to be, because all these rivers need, this is a stent for the river. It's really like that. It's a choked artery that you are, in some sense, it was getting messed up. Not just the choking, but also Ahmedabad was spewing all sorts of dirt into the river. So that's been cleaned up. But it still continues. The industrial effluents still continue downstream of Vasna Barrage, and a lot more needs to be done. this is, as you said, only a tiny effort that will be needed in, well, eventually transforming all of our cities and making them more livable, more productive, more efficient in many ways. But I think that's what it is. It's a sort of possibility as been demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bimal.